Vinland Saga Season 2 is over, and what a show it was. I've had a lot of comments asking me to talk about it, and normally this is where I'd cut to a montage of comments, but that's way too much work editing wise. This video will be a bit all over the place because I won't go through this show in an episodic manner. I'll instead talk about the stuff which fascinated me in a random order. Vinland Saga is one of those shows which uses its visuals to further propagate its message. And that's a good place to start. The message this show pushes is a simple one for the most part. Violence is bad. That isn't exactly a revolutionary outlook on life itself, and for that reason, the show ran a major risk. If not done well, this show could come off as overly preachy. Nobody likes a holier-than-thou attitude in a person or in a fictional work. Its incredible direction is the reason why this show was bearable. Of course, the actual story plays a role, but it's an animation breakdown, shut up. Direction is an incredibly crucial aspect, and these days, it's rare to come across a show which actually tries to do something in this department. You can tell this show is, actually trying right off the bat. The entire opening sequence from episode 1 was an anime-only edition, and I got chills when that whole Carvit narration came full circle in episode 23. I love stuff like that. The show also made use of deliberate color grading shifts and changes in the vibrance and saturation. This was particularly prominent in the episodes storyboarded by Atsushi Kobayashi, whose work was easily the most impressive thing about this show. This season barely had any action, but did it feature a lot of character acting? No, not really. Some of it for sure, but not that much. Were the drawings always strong and captivating? No, they were ridiculously consistent, a lot more so than the first season from what I can remember. Also, some of the close-ups were absurdly well drawn and heavily detailed, but this show did have weak drawings. I remember the 23rd episode having quite a few of those. But was this show boring to look at? Absolutely not. That is the power of good direction and storyboards. Also, I'll talk more about the animation in a second. This show came up with a lot of incredibly creative ways of portraying common things. Death, for example, was so well visualized in the Atsushi Kobayashi storyboarded episode 17. The anime-only opening sequence, the visuals to be more specific, came full circle. The narration came full circle in episode 23. This whole sequence was essentially a life flashing before one's eyes scene, but it was handled in such an amazing way. The various color palettes were carefully used, and this scene wasn't a regular old flashback. They added the current Gardar into his own past, helpless and unable to change anything. The way death was handled in episode 19 was even more creative in my opinion. The forest with the slight chromatic aberration and the uncanny blue-green hue, it looked amazing. This episode was directed by Takafumi Ishida, who has done a lot of CGI and compositing work for a variety of shows. Maybe this experience helped him create this unique look for the forest. The ninth episode was another insanely creative one. Storyboarded by Atsushi Kobayashi, the episode had a colder look to it, if that makes any sense. The vibrance was turned down, which gave it a unique look. Thorfinn gets dragged down as he struggles to reach out. It's such a powerful shot. This particular visual shows up on multiple occasions. I won't spoon feed you the meaning behind every single cut, I'm sure you can figure a lot of it out yourself. Thorfinn frantically trying to grab onto the rocks with the harsh, distorted intercuts. It's so well done. If you're familiar with Norse mythology, or if you have seen the TV show Vikings, you'd know that Valhalla is supposed to be a majestic, grand place, but Vinland Saga's portrayal of the same is anything but that. It looks disgusting in a good way. Also, isn't this the most horrifying thing ever? The cut is intentionally sped up, which makes it even more unnerving. The dialogue near the end of episode 23 talks about some place that's not there, and the camera flies over the ocean almost as if it's looking for the aforementioned place. That's how you use dynamic camera movement. It feels like it has a purpose instead of that, let's rotate the camera because we can approach. I can go on and on about the direction, but let's not. It is an animation breakdown. As I previously mentioned, this show had very little action, and the non-action scenes didn't have a lot of character acting either. However, the drawings were really strong and heavily detailed for the most part. And here's the thing, these designs are ridiculously complicated, both in terms of structure and line work, and they didn't really have all that many experienced lost key animators. I'm sure the team ran into a lot of problems because of this. This show could have looked even more polished if it had a stronger core staff, but since the final product did look really consistent, I won't dwell on it for too long. Of course, having the Attack on Titan Season 4 team help out with episode 15 must have been a huge help. The episode was directed by Tokyo Igarashi of Attack on Titan fame, and it featured names like Daisuke Ninuma, Manabu Akita, and Mikine Kuwabara as animation directors. All of these names are synonymous with the final season of Attack on Titan. And needless to say, episode 15 looked really strong. A lot of the animation in episode 5 was outsourced to Studio Geno. Basically, the team did need help from other teams and studios, which isn't surprising. Of course, this show had been in production for a long time, but it was a 2-core season with ridiculously difficult to draw designs. I wouldn't be surprised if they were cutting it really close. Regardless, they managed to pull off these complicated designs with a remarkable amount of accuracy. They did prioritize certain cuts. For example, this close-up of Thorgil's face is ridiculously good looking. The lines, the shape, even the cut on his lip and the tiny bit of teeth flashing through it. It's so well drawn. These drawings coupled with the amazing art direction looked phenomenal. Animator Akiko Kudo was the MVP for this show. She is literally credited as the main animator, and for good reason. She animated some of the strongest cuts in the entire show, both in the action and the non-action department. She has an extremely strong grasp over the designs and the aesthetic of this show. Even when her contribution was limited to layouts only, her work still looked amazing. Let's also talk about the action animation. There wasn't a lot of it, but it felt special regardless. The action felt grounded. There are a couple of violent scenes which felt satisfying to look at, but for the most part, the action was portrayed as an uncomfortable thing. The only fights which felt somewhat enjoyable were the ones which didn't end with death, and that makes this season different from the previous one. Season 1 would often make a bloody fight cool to look at, occasionally sacrificing realism in the process. Thorkel chucking a spear over half a mountain and impaling 15 guys with it, for example. A scene like that would be amazing if this wasn't a show which pushed a message of non-violence. I can give these scenes a pass because the message wasn't really established back in season 1, but you get my point. The fight from episode 17 was really good. It was storyboarded by series director Shuhei Yabuta, and every movement meant something. It wasn't a flashy fight, it was a grounded one. The original layout had to be toned down a bit because the team wanted a sense of cohesion. Also, these perspectives look incredible. The gory battle from episode 20 felt uncomfortable. Instead of showing the cool murder scenes and calling it a day, the show slowed down and gave us a detailed look at the real nature of warfare. Despite a lack of movement, the message was sent. It wasn't about how good the fight looked. In fact, it was about how bad the fight looked. Also, this sequence was so promising, I made an entire community post about it. This portion of the fight is rotoscoped. Rotoscopy is a technique where live action footage is traced over. First things first, rotoscopy is not the easy way out, generally speaking. Rotoscopy of this magnitude requires an entire live action studio, trained actors, and a proper camera setup, which has to be a logistical nightmare for anime, a medium which operates on extremely low budgets and poor schedules. Also, the actual tracing isn't easy. Anime characters and real people look very different, anatomically speaking, and the animator needs to account for it. Poorly rotoscoped scenes will have a ton of melting and an extremely inconsistent sense of three-dimensionality. This scene was perfectly animated. The detailed designs looked consistent and the movement didn't feel too out of place. Rotoscopy also helped this fight feel more real because it was. I really like the way this comment phrased it. A sense of self-preservation is conveyed here. Neither of the two characters want to die, and their body language conveys that well. While the soldier is obviously a lot more comfortable, he still knows his limits. I know this scene must have been difficult to pull off, but still, I hope this show continues to rely on rotoscopy for the large-scale fights. This is a lot better than the subpar CGI that plagued season 1. And speaking of season 1, I didn't like the goofy comedic visuals. They kneecapped the serious scenes, and season 2 toned it down a lot, much to the dismay of a few manga readers. All in all, this season looked really good. Season 1 had quite a lot of issues, and this season fixed most of those. The art, the direction, the creativity, all of these things made for an amazingly captivating viewing experience. That's about it. Did you like this video? Yes, you did. Check out this other bit of content on screen and subscribe. Do it.